Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, it's a special America's Founding Day series episode because Memorial Day weekend is coming up. And as we gather with family and friends to kick off the start of summer, it's important to pause and remember why we celebrate Memorial Day. It's not a happy occasion. It's not something that you wish someone a happy Memorial Day. It's a somber event because throughout the years, we've forgotten the importance of what Memorial Day is really about. We lost sight of it. But this is a day to honor all those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. More importantly, not the nation, but the nation's ideals, the concepts of liberty and freedom, the freedoms that we cherish today. And when we journey back in time, I want to talk about a man whose name once echoed with the same reverence as Washington. Yet his story for quite some time has been muted by the passage. He was a healer, an orator, a leader, and one of America's first great martyrs in the American Revolution. And I'm talking about Dr. Joseph Warren. His sacrifice at the dawn of the Revolution was not just a huge loss, but it was a spark that ignited the flames of liberty. Imagine Boston in the 1760s and early 1770s. You have the cobblestone streets, the tang of salt in the air from the harbor, but beneath the surface, the tensions are boiling. The city was electric with discontent. You have taxes, soldiers, whispers of tyranny. And the relationship with Great Britain was fraying and fraying fast. Now, at the heart of the growing storm was Dr. Joseph Warren. He was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts. He was a man that was extraordinarily smart, and he had deep compassion for those around him. By the time he hit his early 30s, he was one of Boston's most respected physicians. He was known for his skill and his empathy. He was a widower of 4 young children. He had every reason to go and seek a quiet life to raise those children. But the cries for liberty were too loud to ignore. The injustices by the British were too stark to ignore. And Warren wasn't a man that was going to sit idly by. He possessed a tongue, a fiery pen, and he knew how to give a speech. So he became a leading voice in the patriot cause. He became a trusted member of the inner circle that included Samuel Adams and John Hancock. He was a son of liberty. He didn't just attend meetings. He helped shape the direction of the organization, and his orations on the anniversaries of the Boston Massacre were legendary. He would stir the heart of Bostonians, reminding them of the British overreach at the time, fanning the embers of resistance into a steady flame. And as president of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, the colony's defiance was stark, okay? They had a shadow government set up, and he was, in effect, the rebel leader, guiding Massachusetts towards a very uncertain future. He understood the power of words, the necessity of organization. But more than that, he understood the spirit of the people. He understood the sentiments of the time. And he understood what's deep in all of us, that yearning of liberty. He once wrote to his fellow colonists a message that really resonates even to this day. And it shows his unyielding spirit of a people determined to be free. And he said, our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. Our enemies are numerous and powerful, but we have many friends, determining to be free, and heaven and earth will aid the resolution. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question on which rests the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. Now think about those words. On you depend the fortunes of America, the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. This wasn't just rhetoric for Joseph Warren. It was a profound belief, a sacred charge to all of us. He saw the struggle, not just for themselves, but for posterity. This conviction explains his unwavering commitment, his willingness to risk everything, to put it all on the line. It was a call for courage, a call to responsibility, that we are in charge of our own destiny, that as a people, we have a right to determine our own government, and no government is legitimate without the consent of the governed. It's a reminder that their actions, their sacrifices, there's a reason it echoes through the generations. It was the very spirit that he sought to instill in every single colonist, and that spirit is soon going to be tested by fire, because in April of 1775, the air in Boston was thick with rumors and suspicion. British regulars were preparing to move. Warren, with his network of informants, received critical intelligence that on the evening of April 18th, the British were marching toward Lexington to capture Adams and Hancock, and then on to Concord, where they're going to seize the colonists' military supplies. Now, some suspect that intelligence came from Margaret Gage. Margaret Gage, who was the spouse of British Governor General Thomas Gage, was born a colonist. She had sympathies for the patriot cause, and some even argued that Dr. Joseph Warren and Margaret Gage were having an affair. However, the evidence of that is circumstantial at best. We don't know if that's true. In fact, there are many scholars that believe it isn't true. In any event, there was no time to lose, right? The British are marching, and from the shadows of a city under occupation, Warren made the decision that would change the course of history. He's going to summon a few writers, two in particular, William Dawes and a silversmith named Paul Revere, who you've all heard about, I'm sure. And his instructions were clear. Ride with all speed. Warn Adams and Hancock, alert the countryside that the regulars are coming out. Understand, it was never that the British are coming. Okay, that's been a myth. It's the regulars are coming. Now, the fate of the revolution in that moment is going to rest on their speed and Warren's decisive actions. The next day, as the first shots rang out on Lexington Green and at Concord's North Bridge, the shots heard around the world, the colonial militia, forewarned thanks to Dr. Joseph Warren, met the British. The war begins. And in the weeks that followed, Boston was a city under siege by its own people. Colonial militia, inflamed by the events of April 19th, surrounded the British-occupied city. And Warren was tirelessly at work helping to organize these raw citizen soldiers into some semblance of a military. They were farmers. They weren't soldiers. And on June 14, 1775, in recognition of his leadership, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress commissioned him as a major general. Now, just 3 days later, on June 17th, the British decided to break the siege. Their target, the heights that were overlooking Boston, particularly Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill in Charlestown. The colonists, learning of this plan, moved to fortify those heights overnight. And as dawn broke, the tensions were palpable. General Warren, now officially a high-ranking military officer, he knew exactly where he needed to be. He arrived at the American lines on Breed's Hill as British forces were preparing their assault. And he was offered command by both Colonel William Prescott and General Israel Putnam, both seasoned military men. They offered him the command to sit behind and direct the soldiers. But Warren, who was an extraordinarily humble individual, he was committed to the fight itself rather than personal glory. And so he denied command. I mean, think about that. Could have been off behind the soldiers, directing them in a position of safety. But he reportedly said he had come to fight as a volunteer and asked where the fighting would be heaviest. He knew the risks. He knew the British were professional soldiers. He understood that they were well-equipped, well-trained, well-disciplined, and he knew that the colonial forces were largely farmers, citizens, that were picking up arms to fight for their liberty. They may have been brave, but they were certainly unskilled and untested. Now, Joseph Warren reportedly told his mother he would either return victorious or not at all. And some say he even declared, quote, "These fellows say we won't fight. By heaven, I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood," end quote. Now, whether those exact words were spoken doesn't matter, because his actions that day speak volumes. He took his place in the redoubt, musket in hand, among the men that he had inspired when he didn't have to be there. Twice, the British regulars advanced up the hill, their redcoats a stark target. Twice, the disciplined fire of the colonists ordered to hold until they saw the whites of their eyes. They waited till the British were right in front of them, and then they began driving the British back with devastating losses. And the courage that these citizen soldiers displayed was astounding. Warren was in the thick of it, rallying the men, and his presence alone was an inspiration to them. But the ammunition ran low, and when the British went up the hill to assault it for a third time, it was difficult. Finally, the colonists were overwhelmed. And in those final chaotic moments, as the colonists were forced to retreat, Dr. Joseph Warren, the physician, the orator, the leader, the newly minted Major General fell, a musket ball striking him in the head, killing him instantly. He was just 34 years old at the time. The Battle of Bunker Hill was a tactical victory for the British, but it was a costly one. They may have taken the ground, but their losses were staggering. Their idea to put an end to this rebellion quickly, those hopes vanished for the British. For the Americans, it was a moral victory. It proved that they could stand against the might of the British Army. But the loss of Joseph Warren was a devastating blow. He was initially buried in a mass grave on the battlefield. Finally, his body was identified by Paul Revere, who recognized a false tooth that he crafted for Joseph Warren. And when Joseph Warren died on the battlefield, his death sent shockwaves through the colonies. He was seen as a martyr, as a hero who had given everything for the nascent cause of American liberty. John Trumbull's iconic painting, The Death of General Warren at the Battle of Bunker Hill, would immortalize his sacrifice. It would capture the tragedy, the heroism of that day for future generations. Joseph Warren may have left this earth too soon. He had great potential in the United States, but his death was a rallying cry because it didn't break the patriot spirit. In fact, it strengthened it. His sacrifice. Someone of his stature, if a man of stature with so much to live for was willing to lay down his life for the cause of liberty, then the cause was surely just. The fight was essential. Towns, counties, streets across the new nation are going to eventually bear his name as a testament to his enduring impact on the United States. And he was one of the Revolution's lost heroes. Had he lived, a lot of historians believe he might have played a much larger role in the founding of America, perhaps rivaling those who became the most famous of the founding fathers. And this brings me back to Memorial Day, because Joseph Warren was not a soldier by trade. He was a doctor, a statesman, a citizen who answered the call when his country was in the most dire need. As President Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address, those who here gave their lives that the nation might live gave the last full measure of devotion. The difference is that Joseph Warren didn't do this for a nation that was already established. He did it for the idea of a new nation, for the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn that he so passionately spoke of. Our victory was far from certain, and he was still willing to put it all on the line. And his story, and the story of all those who have fallen alongside of him, whether in the American Revolution or the conflicts that followed, remind us that freedom is not free. When you look at Joseph Warren and people like him, when you look at our soldiers who volunteer today to go into some of the most dangerous areas around the world, understand that this idea of American liberty, it's bought with courage, with conviction, and with blood. As we honor all those who have fallen in service to America, we should remember Dr. Joseph Warren, one of the first sparks of the American Revolution, a man who truly acted worthy of himself, and in doing so, worthy of a new nation, laying the cornerstone of this new world. Now, as we go out and we go to the barbecues and the parades, we may watch the bowl games, there's graduations, other festivities taking place throughout Memorial Day weekend, it can be easy to forget all those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Understand, our military, our army, our soldiers, they don't fight and die for the government. They fight and die for the ideals of America that we've long strayed for. A lot of us ignore the true meaning of this day, and it seems that for far too many Americans, Memorial Day is merely the start of summer beach season, good sales in stores, another day off from work or school. To most people, Memorial Day is a day of little consequence. But Memorial Day is a time devoted and intended to remember and honor the courage, the commitment, the sacrifice of those who gave their lives in service to our nation. There could be no greater sacrifice, no greater cause for respect and honor. Those men and women made the ultimate sacrifice because they believed in a set of noble ideals and principles that went beyond self. Principles and values that define our nation, that make America an exceptional nation, that set it apart from any other country on the face of this globe, especially at this time or at any other time in history. And all of us should aspire to protect and defend the ideals and values and principles that people like Dr. Joseph Warren embodied. Never forget these men and women. Never forget them. Because they purchased the freedoms and liberties we enjoy with their own lives. That's the key to remember. That's why it's so important to get back to our roots, to understand the foundations and the birth of this nation, to understand what the American identity truly embodies, because you see it in Dr. Joseph Warren. That's why I wanted to do this episode for Memorial Day weekend, because he represents the very best that America has to offer. And he laid it on the line before there was even a country. He had a vision. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please share it with others. Take 30 seconds to write a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast platform that allows it. Leave P.A.S. Report a 5-star rating. I want to thank you for joining me. Spend time with your family and friends, but never forget why Memorial Day exists and all those that have lost their lives in service to this nation. And I'll be back next week with more great episodes of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.